I go to a small, private high school where everything revolves around money. It's the kind of place where if your parents don't drive luxury cars or donate generously to the school, you might as well be invisible. Vacations on private islands are the norm, not the exception. That's just how it is. And I'd long since gotten used to it, or at least, I thought I had. But then, a month before prom, I started hearing these whispers. At first, I dismissed it as just another stupid rumor, like all the ones that float around my school, about who's dating who, or who's getting suspended, or which teacher is leaving. But this one kept getting louder, and I couldn't ignore it. It was something called the prom draft. And yeah, it was just as ridiculous as it sounds. It turns out, the most popular guys at school, Jason, Chris, Aaron, and their friends, were running this secret draft, like fantasy football but for prom dates. They were picking which girls they wanted to ask to prom, except instead of athletes, they were trading and ranking girls like we were some kind of prizes. We were the game pieces in their twisted little competition. Now, I'm not part of that crowd. I don't hang out with Jason or his friends, and I wasn't exactly expecting a promposal from any of them. I'd figured I'd skip prom altogether, avoid all the drama, and just enjoy a night off from the insanity that usually surrounds anything related to school social life. But that's not how things worked out. I found out I'd been drafted. And not just by anyone. By Jason Winters himself. If you went to my school, you'd know who Jason was. His family is loaded. I mean, we're talking private jets, luxury cars, designer everything, and vacations on yachts kind of money. They live in this massive mansion that looks like it's straight out of a magazine, with marble floors and a driveway so long you can barely see the house from the gates. Basically, his family runs the school. They donate so much money that the administration treats them like royalty, and Jason walks around like he owns the place because, in a way, he does. He's the golden boy, the untouchable prince, and the worst part. He knows it. Jason is the type of guy who thinks he's better than everyone else because he has more money than he could ever spend. He's arrogant, rude, and condescending, constantly showing off his wealth and acting like he's doing the world a favor just by existing. He doesn't care about the rules because they don't apply to him. After all, his parents are paying half the school's bills, so what's a little misbehavior here and there? A few months ago, I had witnessed firsthand just how much the school bends over backward for Jason. We were in chemistry class, and Jason was being his usual obnoxious self, laughing with his friends, making rude comments, and generally ignoring everything Mrs. Beckett, our teacher, was trying to teach. Finally, she snapped. She'd had enough of his antics, and after class, she told him to stay behind for a talk. Jason just rolled his eyes, like it was a huge inconvenience for him to spend another minute of his precious time in her classroom. But he didn't argue. The rest of us filed out, and I overheard a group of students hanging around the door, curious to see what would happen. Maya, one of my friends, nudged me. "You think anything will come of it?" I shrugged, knowing full well the answer. Probably not. And I was right. A few minutes later, the classroom door swung open, and Jason stormed out. His face was flushed, and I caught a snippet of what Mrs. Beckett said as he left. "You're still accountable for your actions," she told him sternly, but Jason didn't care. He turned around, glared at her, and spat, "You'll regret that." The next day, it was like nothing had ever happened. Mrs. Beckett was practically fawning over Jason, even though he was back to throwing paper wads and making snide remarks under his breath. Word got around that Jason's parents had spoken with the administration, and more than likely, they had slipped Mrs. Beckett a donation to smooth things over. Everyone knew it, but no one dared say anything. Jason's untouchable, after all. So, when I found out that Jason had drafted me for prom, I was beyond annoyed. He didn't pick me because he liked me or because we had anything in common. No, he picked me because, in his eyes, I was a trophy. I guess I was just different enough from the girls who usually fawned over him. I didn't laugh at his jokes. I didn't bat my eyelashes at him or even offer him a pencil in class when he forgot his. I ignored him, and that made me a challenge. The chase was what he wanted, not me. Jason had never spoken more than 5 words to me before this, but suddenly, I was supposed to be his prom date. Like I had no say in the matter. It wasn't about my personality, it was about the game. He'd won me, and that was all he cared about. And that's when the pressure started. Jason was relentless. Every time I saw him, he'd make some comment about how amazing we'd look together at prom, or how he couldn't wait to see me in my dress. He'd find ways to bump into me in the hallways, cornering me after class to remind me that he'd picked me. It was as if, in his mind, I didn't have a choice. I was his date, and that was that. I tried to avoid him, but it was impossible. And then, things got worse. The school started getting involved. One day, I got called into the principal's office. At first, I thought it was about a project or something school-related, but no. The principal sat me down and, in this weirdly serious tone, started talking about how I should consider going to prom with Jason. She didn't come right out and say it, but it was obvious that his family wanted this to happen, and they were using their influence to make sure it did. She hinted that it would be in my best interest to keep Jason happy, as if it were my responsibility to make sure some spoiled rich kid had a good time at prom. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Since when is it the school's job to make sure Jason Winters gets whatever he wants? Oh, right, since his family basically owns the place. After that meeting, it wasn't just Jason who was pressuring me. My teachers started weighing in too. In the middle of history class, my teacher made a comment about how it would be such an honor for any girl to go to prom with Jason, given how much his family does for the school. I just sat there, stunned, while everyone else nodded along like it was perfectly reasonable. Even my friends, who were usually supportive, started telling me I should just go with Jason to avoid the drama. It's just one night, they said. What's the big deal? The only people who weren't thrilled about Jason picking me were the girls in his circle. They had their own table in the cafeteria, dead center, where they sat like they were posing for a magazine cover. They wore custom uniforms, perfectly tailored, somehow managing to push the dress code while flaunting their designer handbags and jewelry. They didn't hide their disdain for me. At first, it was subtle. Dirty looks when I passed by their table, a few whispers here and there. But as prom got closer, their stares became impossible to ignore. Every day at lunch, they'd huddle together, whispering and laughing. I'd catch them glancing at me, shooting me these smug little smiles like they knew something I didn't. One of them, Tessa, was the worst. She'd flash this mean little smirk every time our eyes met, like she was just waiting for the moment when Jason would change his mind and pick one of them instead. I knew exactly what they were thinking. I didn't belong in Jason's world, and they were just waiting for me to fail. Despite all of this, I stood my ground for as long as I could. I wasn't going to let Jason or the school force me into going to prom with someone I barely knew, let alone someone who treated me like a prize he'd won. But the pressure kept building. It was like the entire school was on Jason's side, and I was the one being difficult for not just going along with it. Even my parents started weighing in. They didn't want me to cause any trouble with the school, and after weeks of being told to just get it over with, I finally caved. I wish I could say I stood up for myself and told Jason to go to prom alone, but I didn't. I gave in. The school held a special pre-prom event, a ridiculous, over-the-top ceremony dedicated to the biggest donors and their kids. It was mandatory, of course. The gym was decorated like it was already prom night, with banners, lights, and tables covered in white linens. Parents, staff, and students sat around the tables, clapping politely as the principal stood on stage, smiling like she was hosting a game show. Toward the end of the event, the principal